What an event of an album this has been for the year 2023. It's been what many people are calling quite a quiet year for music. There's not really been as many star-studded, huge name releases, and particularly when looking at hip-hop and on the whole as a genre, you've got to kind of look at the year and think, wow, this has been one of the quietest years, even statistically, based on like the charts and things for so long. Like, this is a really odd off year for hip-hop. By this point, we're only really seeing like a couple of #1 albums, and I'm not even sure we've even seen a #1 hip-hop single yet. I'm pretty sure that might be still the case all the way up until August, which is insane to think, by the way. But Travis Scott came through with his incredibly highly anticipated album, which would have been highly anticipated even without all of the backstory I've just given you there. And yeah, it's felt really nice to see, refreshing to see the conversations, the excitement, the debates online once again, which I've kind of missed this year. There's not really been many albums like that. I mean, we did see a Miley Cyrus album come out, and she's a huge artist, but you weren't exactly seeing much talk on that once it dropped. So I'm grateful that this has come out to provide some interesting conversations, and also grateful that we finally got a Travis Scott album, which felt like was never coming, really. There are some artists at the moment that just feel like we're never going to see the light of day of their music earth again, and they're just disappearing for years and years at a time. Looking at Frank Ocean, obviously. So it's good to see that Utopia's come through, and honestly, in terms of expectations, I wasn't really sure what to think, because I do like Astroworld and I do love Rodeo, and I think Birds is actually pretty decent, to be honest with you, even though a lot of people hate that one. I didn't really know where to expect. I was thinking, what exactly are we going to get from Travis? And to be fair, this is his most ambitious album yet. Like, it's seriously super creative, with a lot of its ideas being thrown in and being melded together to create some really interesting, dark, atmospheric tracks, which we've seen him do before. But I just think in terms of the production style in places, we are seeing him do some new stuff which I wasn't really expecting, and a really huge star-studded feature list on top of that, I think has made for a really good album. It's one of those albums for me where the highlights of the album kind of just write themselves into place. Like, I think a lot of people who are calling the best tracks are pretty much nailing it, to be honest with you. One track for me that's a standout immediately right from the get-go, HYAENA. Man, this track, my god, just as gnarly and as gruff as a hyena just from the get-go. That beat, that strange, like, heavy, gentle giant friggin' sample as well, and funkadelic samples coming through here. It's just so strange to see. Honestly, it made me think, what on earth are we going to get with this album? Like, what is he going to cook? But to be fair, I wouldn't necessarily say many of the other tracks go for this sound, although I wouldn't have been disappointed if we'd seen more of a creative outlook coming through from the sampling usage on all of the songs, to be honest with you, because I think he could have nailed this for a whole album. But yeah, really love the urgency on this track, the type of urgency that I don't feel like we properly get up until right near the end of the album with the Love track, the LOOVE track, which again for me has that similar kind of energy coming through with the beat. It's propulsive, and Travis is just giving us so much like fire coming out. Those two tracks for me stand out so greatly, just in terms of how much fire-packed energy Travis is delivering. From there, though, it's kind of just a bit of a lottery, actually. Like, you don't really know what you're going to get next. I mean, Thank God is way more despondent. It's just so cold in how it sounds. It transitions into an even colder beat, and it sounds great. And then Modern Jam is nothing like the previous two, which has probably the trashiest beat Travis has ever delivered, to be honest with you, man. It sounds somewhere between like Kid Cudi and Kanye, and some of the lines he's coming through are terrible. You know, the bicycle thing, oh god, and the friggin' Eiffel Tower line as well. But there's something about it that's just so confident that I kind of can't help but think, you know what, Travis, you gave us a terrible song here, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I don't like it, because I definitely do like it. My Eyes, which is the most unexpected Frank Ocean type song I think I've heard in some time. Little did I know we'd get a song that sounds so inspired by Blonde from a Travis Scott album. This is really, really pretty sounding. I mean, the beat switch again towards the end, there's lots of beat changes and beat switches that he loves to play around with. Of course, it's Travis Scott. And yeah, I like the way it does kind of go into a bit more of an up-tempo track, but honestly, the first section is so stunning, like the vocals and that like sadness that's just pouring through. It's got a Bon Iver type feel as well. I just think it sounds really, really nice. For me, it's like really like the mid section of this 19 track album where you get some of the absolute highest highs of the whole thing. I mean, Fiend with Playboi Carti, and apparently Sheck Wes is on this track too, which I'm still befuddled by, to be honest with you. It's just an absolute mad one, to be honest. I don't know what Carti is even attempting to do here, but he is so overdoing it to the point where it sounds ridiculous. But at the same time, it kind of sounds amazing. Like, I know he's not one to hold back, and to say that anyone is, you know, doing things a bit too much, you know, and you're talking about Playboi Carti, you're probably missing the point here, but he's definitely going way overboard with this. But it sounds great, and then the actual verse that he comes through with, where his voice is kind of like sounding deeper and more gruffier, yeah, to the point where people weren't even sure who it was. Like, that's a new thing we're hearing from him there, and it's kind of cool to see that being unfolded and unleashed on a Travis album, because it kind of feels like to me the only artist that would bring that sort of weirdness and creativity out of would be Travis. But then you've got DELRESTO with Beyonce, which has a great beat on it as well for me. It's kind of sort of like pushing on from what we've seen Beyonce do with Renaissance, but it's not quite as house inspired. I really think the transition into the more up-tempo beat about 2:46 could have come sooner, because I think that point sounds great. Beyonce's killing it too. I Know is honestly probably the catchiest song on the whole thing, dare I say. Absolutely love the melodies coming through here in that really starry-eyed, twinkly instrumental with Travis just repeating refrains. I know, I know, I know, I know, I know, I know, I know. It just really sticks with me. That immediately on first listen was the one that grabbed me the most, and multiple listens later, it is becoming one of my favourite Travis Scott songs, actually. Maybe that's for another video in the future though, but I really love this track. I really like how it's got some similar parallels to like Oh My This Side, in the way that it kind of feels like it's moving in a nice fluid way. Not to say that it's exactly the same as that song, but I'm hearing some parallels to it. Love this track. Speaking of other parallels though, another track that is quite a highlight honestly is Meltdown, which comes a bit before some of these tracks I just mentioned. But you've got Drake on here talking about tea time. Is that British cultural appropriation? I think it might be. You don't drink tea, my friend, we drink tea. But they're another really good track, just so sinister and dark. I mean, even Drake's delivery. This is what I was saying about Carti bringing out a new side of him because of Travis's vision. You can't not say the same about this one with Drake here. I mean, where else are you going to get a friggin' delivery like that from Drake? It sounds like a totally new version of himself. The beat switches come through as well. Dare I say, I think it's trying to be Sicko Mode Part 2, obviously without Sway Lee. I just think the way it's structured and the way the beat switch comes through and the fact that it's got Drake on, I kind of feel like they are trying to replicate that a little bit. Obviously they sound like, you know, darker. It's a darker sound compared to Sicko Mode, quite clearly, but still the parallels are there. But yeah, later on you've got that K-pop track too, which was a really weird single choice. Of course you've got Bad Bunny on The Weeknd, who are just absolute, you know, streaming giants, two of the biggest artists in the world when it comes to streaming numbers. Of course you're going to want to pull in artists like that on your own track, but the fact that the track itself kind of doesn't sound like anything on the album. I will say, when I heard it as a single, I really didn't find it very enjoyable, but as it flowed towards the end of the track list, I actually think it sounded better in that sort of zone. But even still, underwhelmed by The Weeknd's verse. I think lyrically he's on some really poor lines. He's always had this persona, but I think he's kind of just delivering some really icky lines for me. And for as many great positives as there are with this album, I do want to mention some negatives for me, where it's from Parasail, Schizo to Lost Forever, where this album really loses its stickiness for me. Like, I've never been the biggest West Side Gun fan. I know people will probably curse me for saying that, but I really don't like his verse. I really don't like the hollow beat that track has. That just doesn't fulfill much to me at all. That run of tracks is super weak for me, and this was one of my worries when I saw how long the album was, because I was like, there's probably just going to be those spaces of tracks that just really don't do it for me. You've got K-pop not too long after. Like I said, it sounds okay within the track list, but even as a standalone song, you know, it's one of the weakest on the whole album for sure. And even Telekinesis, which has Future on it, I wasn't that keen on either, to be honest with you. I expected a bit more from that. The closer, though, with James Blake and 21, love that track. I think the James Blake inclusion is so nicely done. I didn't mention Sam for early as well, by the way, who was also on this album. Those kinds of vocals coming through with these kinds of atmospheric trap beats works really well. Honestly, using the word trap seems a bit loose here, actually, because some of these tracks, while yes, Travis is in that lane of music, he is kind of trying to push sounds a little bit further and give himself a new space to be a bit more creative and try new things in, really. And yeah, I think overall the execution is definitely there. I think it's a really strong album with just a few too many weak moments that drag it down for me, because I think there was lots of potential here to be an amazing album, but maybe years down the line it'll grow. I don't know. I mean, Astro World did end up growing on me over time. This could happen with this album too. A general sort of point to make, though, in regards to Travis Scott as an artist that I did want to mention was how people keep talking about how actually it's gotten to a point now where we're so many albums and mixtapes in, what really is his identity? And I do think this is a valid conversation to bring up, because people keep going, not everyone who makes music is lyrical and has all these thematic, you know, tie-ins with all these crazy lyrics and crazy double entendres. Like, if you want that, go somewhere else. You're not going to get it from Travis. But honestly, considering this album's called Utopia and considering all the theories that went into this album before it came out, like, what really is this album actually about? And what are Travis's albums honestly even about, to be fair? Like, I do think it's a valid conversation to be having. I don't go to Travis personally for this kind of thing. And just as the same, I wouldn't go to Playboi Carti for this kind of thing. But it does make you kind of wonder, where could Travis take his music to another level? Because there are a lot of lengthy verses on this album, and when you actually read the lyrics from Travis, he actually isn't saying anything at all. So I think it's totally a valid point for people to bring up. I know people keep getting angry at Pitchfork and other institutions for not getting it, but I challenge Travis to deliver something with a bit more meat to it when you're giving us all this music, and at times you're falling into the backseat and letting your features take the driving position, to be honest with you, because that does happen a few times on this album. But with all that being said, it is very good. It falls short of being great for me for various reasons, including some weaker tracks and what I was just saying about Travis as a whole there. I think a 7 out of 10 is really fair here. I think it's got some excellent tracks and excellent ideas and an excellent atmosphere that ties in the whole album together, despite the fact that some of these tracks are trying some different things from what we've seen him do before. I think there's some of his best songs ever on here. I think there's some weaker tracks that I'm probably not going to be caring too much about a bit down the line. And yeah, I think Utopia is one of the most exciting events of the year. It has delivered in terms of the hype, because I do think this is very good, even if my score itself isn't quite as high as I would have wanted it to have been. But I think you're going to understand why I've given it a score I have, and I think a lot of people totally think that what Travis is doing right now is super, super interesting. It's super creative, and giving it a higher score makes sense to me. And if you're disappointed with this album, I could definitely see that as well, to be honest with you. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. I think that is worthwhile to hear what you think If you agree with me, disagree, what are your favourite tracks, what is the best track on the album, what's your score, tell me all that in the comments. That would be brilliant. Have a good day. Subscribe if you haven't already, please. Check out my Patreon as well, and goodbye.